The smell of roasted pork and plantains filled the warm Miami air as Sofia Martinez stepped onto the porch of her parents' house. She adjusted the sleeves of her blazer, already regretting dressing so formally for what was supposed to be a casual Sunday family dinner. Inside, the house was as lively as ever. Her mother, Elena, bustled around the kitchen, while her father, Carlos, sat at the dining table, sipping his usual cafecito. The sound of salsa music played softly in the background, mixing with the chatter of relatives gathered in the living room. Sofia greeted everyone warmly, but something about her father's stiff posture sent a familiar tension through her. She barely had time to sit before Carlos cleared his throat, tapping the table twice, a habit he had whenever he was about to say something serious. "Mija, we need to talk," he said, setting down his espresso cup. "Here we go again." Sofia forced a smile. "Of course, Dad. What's on your mind?" Across the table, her younger brother, Javier, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a confident smirk on his face. "Your brother has a great business idea," Carlos announced, ignoring her question. "He just needs a little help getting started. I told him he could count on you." Sofia's stomach tightened. This wasn't the first time she'd been asked to help Javier, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. She exhaled slowly, bracing herself for yet another financial request. Sofia took a slow sip of water, buying herself a moment before responding. She had lost count of how many times her family had turned to her for financial help, always with the same justification. She was successful. She could afford it. "Dad," she said carefully, setting her glass down. "I've helped Javier before, multiple times." Her father waved dismissively. "This is different. He's serious this time. He has a solid plan." Sofia turned to Javier, arching a brow. "And what exactly is this plan?" Javier smirked, adjusting the sleeves of his expensive designer hoodie, the same one he had bought last month while complaining about being broke. "It's a real estate flipping business. I just need some capital to start, maybe $30,000? Sofia nearly choked on her drink. "30,000? Carlos nodded as if it were a small favor. "For family, it's not that much." Sofia leaned back, pressing her fingertips against her temples. She had already spent thousands covering their mother's medical expenses, restaurant bills, and even Javier's credit card debt when he had forgotten to pay it. Then, something caught her eye. A bank envelope sat partially tucked under a pile of mail on the table. The bold letters on it read Martinez Family Trust, with Javier's name underneath. Her heart pounded as she reached for it. "Sofia, that's private," Carlos snapped, but she had already seen enough. The balance on the statement? $180,000. Sofia's fingers tightened around the envelope as her father snatched it from her hands, but the damage was already done. The numbers were burned into her memory. $180,000, tucked away for Javier, while she had been repeatedly told that the family had no money to help her. She looked at her father, her voice low but firm. "When were you going to tell me about this?" Carlos's jaw tensed. "It's not what you think." Javier shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. "It looks like a trust fund in Javier's name," Sofia continued, holding back the mix of anger and hurt rising in her chest. "And yet, when I needed help with college, when I was struggling to pay rent after graduation, I was told there wasn't enough." Carlos exhaled sharply. "Javier needed security. You've always been independent." Sofia let out a bitter laugh. "So, because I worked hard and didn't ask for much, I got nothing? But Javier, who has failed at 3 businesses, racked up credit card debt, and needed me to bail him out more than once, gets a safety net?" Elena finally spoke, her voice soft, almost pleading. "Mija, it's not like that." "Then what is it like, Mom?" Sofia asked, her voice raw. "Because to me it looks a lot like favoritism." Silence hung heavy in the air. For the first time, Sofia saw the truth for what it was. Sofia felt the weight of years crashing down on her. The truth had always been there, but she had never let herself see it. She took a shaky breath, her mind racing back to every moment that suddenly made sense. When we were kids, she said, her voice tight, Javier got a brand new car on his 16th birthday. I had to work after school and save up for a used Honda. Javier rolled his eyes, but Sofia pressed on. He went to a private university fully paid for, while I had to take out student loans and work 2 jobs to afford tuition. Carlos scoffed. It was different. You were always more responsible. Sofia's chest tightened. And when I was drowning in bills right after college, barely making rent, I asked for help, and you told me there was nothing to give. But all this time, there was money. It just wasn't for me. Elena shifted uncomfortably. We only wanted the best for both of you. No, Mom, Sofia said, shaking her head, her voice cold. You wanted the best for Javier. I was just expected to figure it out. Carlos slammed his fist on the table. That's enough, Sofia. She didn't flinch. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel small in front of him. She felt powerful. I've given this family everything, she said, standing up. But I am done being the one who sacrifices while Javier gets rewarded for doing nothing. And for the first time, she meant it. Sofia stormed out of her parents' house, her heart pounding against her ribs. The humid Miami night wrapped around her as she got into her car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had spent years believing that giving to her family was an act of love, but now she saw it for what it really was, a burden unfairly placed on her shoulders. When she got home, she pulled out her laptop and opened a spreadsheet she had kept for years but never truly examined. Financial contributions, family. As she scrolled through the numbers, nausea built in her stomach. $32,000, covering restaurant bills when her father said money was tight. $25,000, her mother's medical expenses. $18,500, paying off Javier's credit card debt. $15,000, home repairs after a hurricane damaged their roof. Total, nearly $95,000 in 6 years. And all the while they were saving $180,000 for Javier. Her hands trembled as she made 3 crucial decisions. 1, she canceled the automatic payments she had set up for Javier's loans. 2, she informed her mother that she would no longer be covering medical expenses. 3, she redirected $95,000 from her brokerage account into a personal investment fund. Her future. The guilt tried to creep in, but for once, she didn't let it. She wasn't abandoning her family. She was saving herself. And this time, she knew she wouldn't turn back. The next morning, Sofia's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Javier, what the hell, Sofia? The bank says my student loan payment didn't go through. Are you trying to screw up my credit? She ignored it. Then came a voicemail from her father. His voice was sharp, laced with disappointment. Carlos. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this isn't how family acts. We help each other. You've always been the responsible one. We count on you. Sofia clenched her jaw. Of course, they counted on her. They always had. By lunchtime, her mother finally called. This time it was different. Soft. Cautious. Elena, mija, your father is very upset. The property taxes are due soon, and now we're in a difficult position. Sofia exhaled slowly, gripping her coffee cup. Mom, you had $180,000 put away for Javier, she said, her voice steady. Why don't you use that? A long silence. Then, a quiet, It's not that simple. Sofia let out a bitter laugh. Funny, it's been pretty simple for me these past 6 years. For the first time, her mother had nothing to say. Sofia ended the call, silencing her phone completely. Let them figure it out. For once, she wasn't going to be their solution. By Saturday, Sofia's cousin Daniel sent her a warning text. Daniel, heads up, your dad called a family meeting at their house today. Sounds like they're planning to pressure you into paying. Sofia exhaled slowly, her fingers tightening around her phone. She wasn't surprised. This was classic Carlos Martinez. When he didn't get his way, he gathered the troops. Instead of ignoring it, she decided to face it head on. Enough was enough. That evening, she arrived at her parents' house in a crisp navy blazer and heels, the same outfit she wore for high-stakes business meetings. Because this was a negotiation. The moment she stepped inside, she could feel the tension. Carlos stood by the fireplace, mid-speech, while aunts, uncles, and cousins listened. Elena sat on the couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Ah, here she is," Carlos announced. "Let's talk about what it means to be family." Sophia walked to the center of the room, pulled a folder from her bag, and laid it on the coffee table. "In the last 6 years, I've given this family nearly $95,000. It's all documented right here," she said calmly. "Meanwhile, you saved $180,000 for Javier and never once offered me help." A stunned silence filled the room. For the first time, her father had no response. Carlos's face turned red, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. The truth was laid out in front of everyone. Sophia watched as her relatives skimmed through the documents, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock. Her Aunt Marisol was the first to speak. "Wait, you've been paying their property taxes too?" Sophia nodded. "Every year. And covering Javier's debts and helping with the restaurant." A murmur rippled through the room. Her father's carefully crafted narrative was crumbling. Javier, for once, looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Look, I didn't ask for a trust fund," he mumbled. Sophia scoffed. "No, but you had no problem taking everything handed to you while I struggled." Her mother Elena finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost defeated. "Mija, we never meant to make you feel unappreciated." Sophia exhaled. "But you did." A long silence stretched between them, and for the first time, she didn't feel responsible for fixing it. That night, she drove home without the weight of obligation pressing down on her. The next morning, her bank notification popped up. $95,000 successfully transferred into her new personal investment account. And just like that, she had taken her life back. Let them figure things out for once. She had spent years taking care of them. Now it was time to take care of herself. Lessons learned from the story. 1. Family. Obligations have limits. Love and loyalty to family are important, but they should never come at the expense of your financial security and mental well-being. 2. Being independent shouldn't mean being exploited. Just because someone is responsible and self-sufficient doesn't mean they should be the one carrying the entire family's burdens. 3. Favoritism exists even in families. Parents don't always treat their children equally, and sometimes it takes years to recognize the imbalance. Facing it and setting boundaries is crucial. 4. Setting boundaries is not selfish, it's necessary. Saying no is difficult, especially to loved ones, but it is essential for long-term self-preservation and financial independence. 5. People will expect you to keep giving until you stop. If you don't set limits, others will continue to rely on you without question. Only when you step back do they realize your contributions. 6. You can love your family without funding their lifestyle. Financial support should be a choice, not an obligation. True family relationships should be based on love and respect, not money. 7. It's never too late to take control. No matter how long you've been financially supporting others, you always have the power to change. Taking care of yourself is just as important as taking care of others.